What's going on, everybody? Today I want to share with you my new assembly table. Well, welcome back, everybody. Jason with Ben's Woodworking. Today I'm really excited to show you guys the new assembly table that I've been working on for a couple of weeks now. Unfortunately, this will not be a build video, meaning I'm not going to show you step by step the process that I took to build the table. But what I am going to do is I'm going to share some useful information. I'm going to share with you some features. I'm going to share with you the capabilities of my assembly table. And then I'm going to kind of give you an idea of where my mind was when I made certain decisions. So hopefully that'll help you should you choose to build a table like this in the future. This is the new assembly table that I built. I used to use a Polk style workbench. It did work very well for a very long time. The only downside, it just became an area for storage. It was not very flat, if I'm being totally honest. And for a long time, I never believed that having a very flat surface really made that much of a difference. And now I'm a pretty firm believer that the flatter the surface, obviously, the better and easier it is to assemble and install or do whatever it is that you're doing woodworking related. Real quick, I just want to go over the overall dimensions of my table and talk about how that's different from the previous table that I had. This table is 38 inches compared to the 34 inches that my last assembly table was. The overall length of my table this time is only 60 inches compared to the 72 that it was on my previous table. The width of this assembly table is now 40 inches as opposed to my previous table, which was 48 inches. What I've found out over time is while it is absolutely beneficial to have a large work surface, I realized that I didn't use the entire work surface very often. Matter of fact, I never use the entire work surface. The other thing that I identified is that on the side that has my boom arm assembly, that's the side of the assembly table that I'm working 90% of the time. This tabletop is still going to allow me the same capabilities as my last table. The only difference is I won't have as much open space on, let's say, a tabletop glue up, but again, I don't really need it. Probably the biggest difference that I made in this table, obviously, is the height. And the reason I went higher is because my previous table was 34 inches, because I thought that I would want it to be the same height as everything else. What I ended up finding out is that I never used it to reference any other tool or anything, and I never needed it to be 34 inches tall. And me, I am 6'2", and 34 inches is a little low for me, especially if I'm sitting here sanding or doing fine detail work. I can stand very, very comfortably at my assembly table and work on my projects and not have to continuously bend over to do certain tasks. The entire reason I made this assembly table was to house my different Systainers from Festool. In total, this assembly table currently houses 16 of my Systainers. As I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for an assembly table, the one thing that I knew is that I absolutely wanted to build something that would house all of my Systainers in one location. I could have easy access to them, and at the same time, I could actually start using the Systainers for what they're for. Before I get into the actual pull-out drawer assembly and details, I do kind of want to show you a rough overview of the construction. So underneath, notice how there is a toe kick. All I did for the toe kick on this project is basically build a frame that the entire unit itself sat on top of, and then I attached it. And it's roughly 4 inches on each side. The construction itself is just 4 of these vertical walls that attach to one solid piece of plywood down on the bottom. Across the top, you will see my supports, which are just roughly 3-inch wide pieces of 3/4 inch ply that I used in the front, in the middle, and towards the back. I will say that when I built this thing, initially, as soon as I put my first piece of MDF on the top of the table, it did rock side to side pretty substantially. I didn't have any supports across the middle that would stop it from moving side to side. And that was a choice that I made thinking that it wouldn't make that big of a difference, and I was 100% wrong. I'll zoom in here and I'll show you real quick just how I went about fixing that issue. What I ended up doing was taking some scrap plywood that I had, and I cut 2 vertical supports and then connected them with some lateral braces, one at the top, one at the bottom, and one in the center. As soon as I installed those, it completely took the rock out of it, and now this thing is solid. The thing that I get the most questions on, and that's about the drawers themselves. And the questions that I've been getting are how wide you make them, how deep you make them, how do you stop the boxes from sliding back and forth, and then how do you attach the piece to pull them out. All those different things. I'm going to try to answer those and give you a little bit more specifics since it's pertinent to an assembly table if you're trying to build one that has your own pull-out slides. The slides that I use for this project are 14-inch full extension drawer slides, and what that allows is for my shelf to come out far enough to where I can open up the Systainer, have easy access to the tool, put anything in, take anything out, and nothing is impeding it. The overall width of each one of my pull-out shelves is 16 1/8 inch. The depth from front to back on the shelf itself, not including the pole that I attach to it or the front, is 13 inches. I'll come in here so you can get a closer look at the actual shelf itself. So for the front, all I used was 3/4 inch material, and the way that I attached that 3/4 inch material is with pocket screws here, and I just set up a little jig to make sure that every single one was the same. They do hide, they overhang a little bit, just enough to hide the slides on the side. And I placed this over the top with some glue, pinned it in place in a couple spots, flipped it over, and then put my pocket hole screws down to the front just to hold them in place. The piece that I ended up adding on here to stop the Systainers from sliding back and forth is just some scrap offcuts from my shelves that I had already had painted that sit perfectly flush with the back, and there's about 1/4 inch space between the edge of this and the back of the Systainer. For the front here, this being the top of the shelf, this protrudes just 1/4 inch above the surface, and on the bottom here, it's approximately 1/2 inch from the bottom. And the reason I decided to do that is because I figured when I went to go pull this, I was going to use the majority of my fingers on the bottom and kind of just guide it with my thumb. Now, while I'm very happy that I did that, the only thing that I would have done different is for the top, I would have made this 1/2 inch also, just because on the bottom of the Systainers, there are these little feet, and those feet are roughly 1/4 inch tall, so this can slide and kind of prop up on it, but it has not been an issue yet. For the drawer slides, I simply attach the drawer slides directly to the plywood sides. I did not experience any issues with the wood splitting simply because I started a small pilot hole to avoid that, and a lot of people were asking me that saw that I did that if they thought that these would stand the test of time, and I can't answer that question now because it hasn't been any time. So I've done it before, it's worked out fine, I think we'll be okay. What I ended up doing is making sure that I put the spacing of my face or my pole the same spacing here, so that way when I push these drawers in, they ended up sitting flush. Now the last thing to note is the overall distance between each divider, which takes into account the drawer slides, the drawer, Systainer, everything. And that measurement on each one of these is 17 1/8. I still wanted to incorporate drawers for storage, obviously. And so I put these 4 drawers over on the side of the assembly table that I work on the most. There's nothing fancy about these drawers. It is very simple 3/4 inch plywood construction. I used pocket holes to actually assemble the fronts to the sides, something very quick, 1/4 inch MDF on the bottom, and then I put the drawer fronts over the front of that. I did the same thing in terms of recessing the drawers. Therefore, they would sit in between the 2 walls as opposed to covering up this with overhang. The way that I organize my drawers is the items that I use most commonly are at my hand level. And then as I work my way down, things that I don't use as commonly, all the way down to the bottom, which is things that I don't use hardly at all, but I still want accessible for the times that I do use them. I also like to store anything that I need to replenish any other storage containers. Now I want to take a minute to discuss the top. So for the tabletop itself, the torsion box portion, I did it exactly like you would expect. And I'll go ahead and show a little quick video clip here on exactly how I went about making that torsion box top for those of you that may not be familiar with what that is. That video showed me all the way up to placing the bottom skin on. Once I got that bottom skin on, the next day I came in after the glue had had a chance to dry. I took my router, used a flush trim bit, went all the way around to ensure that I now had a perfectly lined up edge with the skin and the actual grid system itself. Once I got everything flushed up, I then flipped that over, and at that time I was able to glue the grid system and then place my top skin on. From there, I just followed the exact same steps. I let it dry, came back with my flush trim bit, went all the way around until I had perfectly flush torsion box top. The part I was most excited about and the idea that I had to add is adding a piece of 3/4 inch thick black laminate. There's 3 reasons why I chose to do black laminate for my overall work surface. First reason is it provides a very nice smooth surface. Reason number 2 was I figured glue and things like that would be much easier to clean up, and I've already found that that is the case. And the third reason, basically because I think it looks cool. Now, the torsion box itself is the MDF construction. To be fair, I did not use the winding stick method or shimming anything, because luckily when I put my first skin on top of my assembly table base, there was no areas that needed to be shimmed. Everything was very, very, very flat. So I was lucky in that sense. When it came to the black laminate portion, I took a very similar approach to the MDF, where I made it a 1/2 inch wider and a 1/2 inch longer. And then I put it on top, I clamped it in place, ran around with my flush trim bit, made sure that it was perfectly flush to the table underneath it. Once I got to the side that I had clamped down, I simply moved the clamps to the other side, flush trimmed everything, and I was good to go. The final step that I took is applying the edging, as you see here. That was very simple. I just cut a piece to length for both ends and cut those to the exact width. And then I took my 2 pieces that you see in the front and here in front of me, and I made sure that they were long enough to cover the ends. I did use some screws to hold things in place, which people have been giving me a lot of flack for, because I put the black drywall screws into the walnut. However, there's a reason why I did that, because I had the black top. I thought that a few screws, almost as decorative screws, would be a nice touch, and I think it is. Not everybody might feel that way. So after I got my edging on, there was one thing that I was concerned about, and it actually ended up happening, but I'm gonna tell you how I fixed it. The black laminate itself is not an MDF core, it is a particle board core. So I was a little bit nervous that once I cut this thing down, that it may not stay perfectly flat, and it didn't. It didn't move a lot, but it moved enough to where I didn't like it. So the way that I fixed that was very simple. I just drilled 4 screws, 1 in each corner, and countersunk them and drilled it down. This is a removable skin that is replaceable. If this top ever gets to the point where it can't be used anymore, I undo the 4 screws, flip it over, screw it back in, and now I have the bottom side to use. One question that I have been getting a lot is, how am I going to get that out and flip it over? And that's very simple. All I did is I use a Forstner bit at my drill press to cut a half moon shape so I have access to this board should I ever need it. Okay, so now to address the walnut elephant in the room. The most common question that I've gotten since I've been posting about my assembly table is, Jason, why in the world are you using walnut for your shop furniture? And my response is usually a question back to them, which is, why are you not using walnut in your shop furniture? I'm just kidding. In all honesty, the reason I used walnut for this project, one, I really like the white and walnut contrast. I just think that's a really, really good combination. And 2, I'm just fortunate enough to have a bunch of walnut scraps that I was able to get for free, basically, from a tool purchase that I made a long time ago, and somebody gave me a bunch of walnut, and I've been looking for reasons to use it. And I just love walnut. One thing I can assure you is that you will start seeing more walnut accents in my shop. because I like it and I want to use it, and I've got to use it for something. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's not a build video and I didn't show you every step-by-step process. I don't really think that's necessary all the time. Hopefully I did share the pertinent information that will help you in terms of building this. Remember, everybody's projects are gonna have different features. They're gonna have different requirements, different dimensions. Hopefully I showed you enough here to kind of give you a point in the right direction if you're thinking about building something similar to this. If I was unable to answer any of those questions, as always, feel free to send me a message, put it in the comments section below. Go over to Instagram. If you're not on there, follow me at Ben's Woodworking, and I'd be happy to answer any DMs, any questions that you might have about this assembly table or anything else. I know I say this a lot, but my whole reason for being on Instagram and YouTube is not for my business. It's because I enjoy teaching and I want to help. So if I can help you in any way, please let me know. That's going to do it for me this week, everybody. I really look forward to our next video. Not sure exactly what that's going to be yet, but it might have something to do with cabinetry again. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.